All right. Welcome to the NHC Roundtable. I'm joined tonight by five of my friends. Kevin Costello, a two-time NHC Tour champion, and he has cashed in the NHC 3 different times. Dave Nichols, the current NHC Tour champion and 13-time NHC qualifier. Jeff Busson, a 10-time NHC qualifier, and he's cashed in the event twice. Greg Lewis, a 4-time top 15 tour finisher, an 8-time NHC qualifier, and he's also cashed once in the event. And Jeff Vandry, a 7-time NHC qualifier. He's cashed twice, including a 2021 final table appearance. Thanks, fellas, for joining me tonight on the roundtable.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be here.
Happy to be here.
Nice to see you, John.
So we got a couple of inquiries on whether I would do a NHC-centric podcast, and I threw out the idea to these fellas, and they all wanted to participate. So thank you very much. So the idea behind the podcast is we're going to try to discuss how we prepare for the NHC, meaning before we get there, what we do when we are there, and what's our general insights as how do we play the event as it goes on. So let's start with the new 2026 Tour champion, Mr. Nichols. Do you do any work pre-past performances? Like, for instance, I think about strategy. I have these like 8.5 by 11 sheets that I create that get my thoughts together by track, and it's somewhere that I'll keep notes when I do start handicapping. Do you do anything pre-past performances, or do you wait till the PPs actually come out?
I treat it a little bit like the BCBC in that I watch a lot of replays. Generally, horses will come back between 3 and 6 weeks from their last race. So I'll watch replays from the last month at each of the tracks, especially tracks because I play on horse tourneys and horse players mostly. Tracks like Oaklawn, Fairgrounds, Turfway, tracks I might not be watching as intensely as some of the other ones. I'll definitely catch up and watch a lot of those replays just so that when the past performances do come out for those tracks, I'll have a little bit of familiarity for the horses that'll appear.
Makes perfect sense. Kevin, do you do anything special pre-entry?
You know, John, I have a set of sheets similar to your own. Developed them like the second or third year that I played the NHC because I realized in my first couple of years at the NHC how there's just so much work, you know, to really maximize your chances and give yourself the best chance. It's not only that you have to handicap the horses, you have to know where on the card your best picks are so that you can allocate the limited number of optional plays that you have in the maximum possible benefit. Like, you know, I remember the first couple of times I played the NHC, I used up some of my optional plays, and then I had some long shots in the later races that I couldn't even play.
Greg, how do you handle the pre-past performance issues?
What I do is my data comes up like on Wednesday. So last couple of years, I've been trying to get out there by Wednesday morning. And then before that, I may look at some charts on the tracks and kind of get maybe some thinking a race flow of certain tracks, and also kind of maybe check the weather report to kind of get that in your mind. You know, is Oaklawn going to be soup? Are we going to be off the, on the grass at Gulfstream, things like that, or actually more of the fairgrounds getting bad weather this time of year. So we'll see race flow, how tracks, any biases that are there, and just cut. And I think you have to. I'm not big on watching replays because I can't remember the horse that ran. So I kind of look at the data, but the only thing I do and that's pretty much not much pre-work. I do a lot of work once I get out there.
Jeff Busson, how about you?
I try to, I have a similar type of summary sheets that I think you and Kevin mentioned. It's very helpful for me to be able to visualize the entire day, whether it's 8 tracks or 9 tracks. I go 3 tracks across the top, and then each race down, each row. And I just I make before, as long as the entries are out, but the PPs may not be, I'll at least, I'll have all the post times, I'll have all the the number of runners, which then, you have to update later after scratches. And it just, when we go through the actual day and the races are over, I X them off as we go. Cause for me, it helps me, visualize, where we are in the day. And, when we get towards the end, what optionals you want to play.
Sure. And Jeff Vandry, how about you?
Well, until prior to the PPs coming out, I've got a couple of spreadsheets that I maintain. I've started them over the last maybe 3 or 4 years. That some of them are per track, some of them are NHC based, like analyzing the all the plays that have come out, like from a macro level.
Sure.
So I usually do that quite soon after NHC, but then after it's over. But then at this point, like prior to the end of this week, when the initial entries are going to come out, I've been reviewing those, just trying to clean things up, maybe make a couple of tweaks that I'm trying to make the process, very efficient come NHC time, because it's very hard to go through and handicap 80 races a day. And then when you're trying to go back and look at information, whether it's, some jockey stats that I keep on my own or whatever else it may be, it's very hard to do when you're in that room. So prior to this weekend, it's really just that, thinking a little bit about strategy on, what did I do wrong previously? What do I want to change a little bit more this year? So that's pretty much it prior to diving into PPs.
Yeah, and Dave jogged my memory too when he talked about replays. I'm not a big replay watcher, but I've been going back to just charts for the same tracks that Dave's talking about. I'll look at Oaklawn, I'll look at Fairgrounds, which I don't follow normally, and just to see if everything on the dirt is being won by front runners. Then I can go back and take a look at, was there a bias on this track, and maybe I can find a nugget in there. How is the turf playing at Gulfstream or Santa Anita if I'm not following them regularly at Tampa? I think that's a good piece of prep work going back 3 to 6 weeks. And you can flip through charts really quickly to see if there was any bias or if it was all front runners, all closes, et cetera. And that's something that you can do prior to getting the past performances.
Definitely.
So Kevin, when do you plan on arriving in Las Vegas? So the tournament starts officially on Friday. We got last chance, first chance on Thursday. When do you normally arrive in Vegas?
Yeah, I've been arriving usually Wednesday, late afternoon. Get in, enjoy myself Wednesday night, have a nice dinner, maybe a glass of Barolo or something as part of my normal prep. And
Just one?
Well, I'll only cop to one. Let's put it that way.
Have you ever considered coming earlier or coming later?
Not at this point, because I think the thing is, I really enjoy the tour. I think the tour is great. And, congrats to Dave. I think we've all congratulated him this year on it. And the first chance, last chance is really, it's a big deal for the tour. If you get out of the gate good in the first chance, last chance, it really gives you a good shot, to have a good year. And so, the more I started realizing first chance, last chance was kind of like a must-play tournament. If you want to have a decent shot at playing the tour for a given year, I started coming on Wednesdays. It used to be I'd come in on Thursdays and I didn't even know what the first chance, last chance was.
Sure.
But being that, if I get in on Wednesday, I feel comfortable enough. I will usually have the first chance, last chance handicapped by Monday. I'll look at that immediately when stuff starts coming out on Sunday, Monday, have it done and wrapped up, so that when I'm in Vegas, I'm already focusing on Friday. Really important, at least in my opinion, especially because I'm a pen and paper guy. I'm not a software guy. I really want to try to stay 2 days ahead of everything as much as I can, because it takes that amount of time to get through these cards.
Great. Greg, when do you plan on coming, and is this your normal arrival time?
In normal arrival time, I'll be coming in Tuesday night, and then all Wednesday, because my dad gets there about 10. So, I'll do something in the morning, and then start from like 8 hours, just from like 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Wednesday. I will get through Thursday and probably Friday. So I'll have those, and then write down kind of how I'm going to play it. So
Okay.
it's on, not pick and pray, but it's pretty close those first 2 days. And then, if I get to Saturday, I get to Saturday.
And Jeff,
So I want to
Jeff-
walk in one or at least a card and a half ahead when I walk in. So when I walk in Thursday morning, I want to have all of Thursday and most of Friday completed. And then by Friday morning, I want half of Saturday completed.
Okay.
So I want to be really ahead of the game. So I'm just writing down numbers and, firing tickets.
And Jeff Bussin, when are you going to come in?
I will be arriving Wednesday afternoon. That's pretty standard for me. I totally agree with what Kevin said about the first chance, last chance. It's so crucial for anybody that wants to compete on the NHC Tour. And I think all 6 of us on this board we're in the top 15 this year. So everybody on this board knows how important that first chance, last chance is. So fortunately for me, I have a 6-hour plane ride. So I got plenty of time to get organized, go through first chance, last chance. Hopefully, usually I have time to go through maybe some of the Friday NHC, at least the bigger tracks that I'm most interested in. And then go from there.
So Jeff Vandry's our lone full-time West Coaster out in Arizona. When do you end up getting into the city, Jeff?
I'll get in Wednesday morning. So just, as you guys have already said, I've come to realize that the first chance, last chance tournament is pretty key if you're going to make any move on the tour. And this year being my my Achilles heel was that on track score, and certainly the first chance, last chance is is a big one if you can get started out right. So I try to get as much done as I can here at home, and then as I get in there on Wednesday, I'll enjoy Vegas a little bit, and then take most of the night and make sure that everything's lined up so that I'm not handicapping the first chance, last chance on while I'm there on Thursday, and
Sure.
again try to get most of Friday done, which usually I'm successful at. The Thursday, Friday, it seems like one of my issues in the past has been just not being as prepared for Saturday, and part of that is just timing on when the past performances come out, and then also being focused on those 2 tournaments over those 2 days. So one of my focus points this year is to try to get ahead of that a little bit more, and maybe be more prepared on Saturday instead of doing as much in that room.
And Dave, when are you planning on heading out?
I'll be there Tuesday night this time. Usually I get out there Wednesday night. It's not really NHC related. It's to go to dinner with somebody, but yeah, the normal plan is to get out there just so I can do a little bit of prep on things like first chance, last chance. But for the most part, I think the weekend before I head out there, I tend to do it by track as it comes out. So like Fairgrounds always seems to be the first one to have like all their stuff, so I can kind of rip through Fairgrounds and get that done. And I try to do some tracks as they come out, as opposed to like the dates that they come out. But like Jeff Vandry said, like some of that you don't control. Like I think Tampa doesn't put out their their Friday card until like Tuesday night or Wednesday, something like that. So some of that you just can't control. You take it as it comes.
Yeah, so I'm the odd bird in this group. I normally go out on Tuesdays. This year, I'm actually going to go out on Monday. I find coming from the East Coast, I have wicked jet lag on the second day that I'm there. So when I go out there on Tuesdays, Thursday morning is like, oh, I'm dragging. So I figured I'm going to try to go out on Monday, so hopefully get rid of the jet lag by Wednesday. And then on Thursday for the last chance, first chance, I'll be fresh and ready to go. So do the other players, Jeff and Dave, do you have any jet lag or East Coast bias when you go out there?
I don't notice any.
Okay.
Doesn't really bother me.
I'm a bad flyer, so yes, but it has nothing to do with this trip in particular. Maybe being out there on Tuesday will actually help a little bit.
I don't really get jet lag. I just get up
It
early
is what it
anyways.
is.
So
Yeah, and Kevin, you're used to this trip, right? Going back and forth to San Diego fairly often from Chicago?
Yeah, I do it all the time, and I have no problems that caffeine can't cure.
There you go. Perfect. So now that we get to Vegas, you talk about handicapping a little bit and trying to prepare for the early cards. So when the past performances come out, it can be a little overwhelming, right? How do you handle the handicapping aspect? How do you do all 8 tracks each day? How do you handle all of the races, and especially tracks that you're unfamiliar with? In the past, I've ignored some tracks. I used to ignore Golden Gate. I would ignore Laurel, or at least give them just a very perfunctory look at them, see if anything jumped out. Let's start with Greg. When you say you get your data on Tuesday or Wednesday, are you looking at every race at every track, or are you trying to find certain things you want to focus on to try to make that handicapping aspect a little bit easier on yourself?
well, what I do is I have a pad for each day, and then one page within that pad for each track. So I'll put lines up and down, and then I have some filters. I put the numbers to the side and see if the numbers pop, and then I'll look at the size of the field. It's a 6-horse field, and the favorites looks tough. I'm gonna spend 45 seconds in that race and kind of put lines. Pass. This one's interesting. Circle it, and then kind of do that. Do one card at a time, pretty much. I'll put all my numbers down, and then go back and do one card at a time, and then just go pass or look at. And if there's something I like, I circle it and make sure I play it the next day.
Now, will that count for Thursday as well, Greg? For the
The same thing each day. I mean, for Friday or Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, I just pretty much the same methodology.
And for Jeff Bussin, you have the 6-hour plane flight that you're going to look at least Thursday's races. Do you look at Fridays then too, or how do you handle so many tracks and so many past performances?
Yeah, I'll definitely look at Thursday's races, and usually I have time to also look at some of Friday's races, and usually I'll look at the East Coast tracks, Gulfstream, Aqueduct, and Tampa, and I'll take a quick glance through all of them. But when there's 8 or 9 tracks, I find that difficult to do. So I might skip Laurel and this year Colonial, and when you get into the middle of the day, there's usually a point in time where literally almost every track is running at the same time, and that can get to be really crazy. So it's important to make sure you have all your mandatories pre-handicapped very thoroughly, and then when the East Coast tracks finally come to an end, I find that I can game time handicap some of the later tracks. Like I'll definitely look at Santa ahead of time, but in terms of Turfway and Fairgrounds in Oaklawn, I find I don't have enough time to do all the tracks a day or two ahead of time. So some of them I'll do day of.
Jeff Vandry, how about you? How do you tackle Thursdays, last chance, first chance, and then transitioning into Friday and Saturday? You said you were worried in the past you didn't give Saturday its full complement. So how do you plan on trying to do better, as it were?
Well, once I think for Thursday, I think the first entries come out this Thursday. So
Okay.
So as soon as those come out, I'll start looking at like Fairgrounds. I think I'm not sure if it's Tampa. I know the Tampa Saturday one comes out very late. But anyways, I think Gulfstream, Fairgrounds, there's a few that'll come out Thursday. I'll start looking at those, just going through the races, watching a few replays. I don't watch too many, but I may watch a few. The one big thing I'm looking for there is, before I dive into actually handicapping, is I'm trying to eliminate races. I will, I think you mentioned, Colonial, Colonial, Laurel. I pretty much won't even look at those. I'll do a cursory look through just to make sure there's not something that stands out that I would regret if I didn't play. But since I don't follow those tracks, there's not, I'm trying to reduce that workload. I will look at pretty much all of Tampa, all of Gulfstream, Fairgrounds a little bit, a lot of Oaklawn. So I'm essentially trying to cut that list. So if there's, roughly 75, 80 races a day, of the, and then, I guess you're looking at, 70, 60, 70 optionals a day. I'd like to reduce that list down to 30 or 40 that, that I can try to get a handle on. And that'll be from, field size, the track, like I just mentioned. It'll be, things such as a bunch of first-time starters. I may not take a look at that race. So I'm trying to eliminate, and then I can do that fairly quickly once the initial entries come out, and then after that, I'll start digging in and trying to handicap.
And how do you go about it, Dave? You talked about watching replays pre-past performances. Then do you incorporate replays once you get the past performances?
Yes. Although if I click on a replay and it's one that resonates and I'm like, oh, I've already seen this, generally I'll remember a little bit of the flow of the race or whatever, or horses that stood out in that race. If it's a bunch of horses exiting a common race, I'll certainly watch it again just to make sure I didn't miss anything. I would say there's a little bit extra replay watching for those races. Again, because sometimes I just try to go through the whole track for that weekend. Sometimes I end up in a situation with like Fairgrounds, which comes out early, that I'll have actually done Sunday at Fairgrounds before I've done, Friday or Saturday at another track.
Sure.
But in a way, it can help because it just gets it out of the way.
Do you use Formulator to keep notes when you're that far ahead so you don't confuse the days?
I should.
Okay.
For the most part, I don't. I tend to keep a spreadsheet with a lot of notes. It probably makes more sense to just put it in a formulator because that's what I'll be looking at. But I am taking notes. I'm actually taking extra notes on things like pace setters in the race, because we all go through that experience at the beginning of the day where the scratches come out and that kind of like you almost have to re-handicap a race a little bit. So if I know that ahead of time, I'll know which races I really need to re-handicap and which ones I might just have to take like a cursory look at.
Great. And Kevin, how about you? You talk about being a pen and paper guy. That's a lot of work to just use pen and paper for 4 days of handicapping. So how do you look at Thursday, go to Friday? What are you doing for the tracks to get through them?
So, John, I think the first thing I'd say, and I think it'll resonate with a lot of people here, is the first thing we have to handicap is ourselves. We need to know what it is that we do well, and then focus our energies on that. And then the next thing we need to handicap is the card. And what I mean by the card, as opposed to handicapping a race, is where are the races that are going to yield the kind of payouts that are going to give us a competitive chance in a 700-person tournament. And it's not that you can't find value in a 5-horse field or a 6-horse field, but if you're looking at races like that, you really need to be looking at seriously vulnerable favorites. So I think a lot of times what you're looking for races that are volatile. You might want to look in the maiden races and some of the full field turf races where they tend to be closer together at the finish line. And, smaller margins decide the difference between a 14-1 winning and a 14-1 running third behind the chalk. So I think, knowing yourself, knowing what your strengths are, knowing what the card is giving you, where are the races that are going to produce the best overlays and the best opportunities and the best payouts. If you handicap that first, and then you handicap the races that fit that profile, I think that's how you can optimize your chances. And the one other thing that I would say about it, that this is really why I started making those spreadsheets where I kind of draw out what my daily strategy is going to be, where you may have 20 plays on Saturday. I think you have 12 optionals and 8 mandatories. The 8 mandatories take care of themselves. You handicap the race, you find the winner, you do the best you can. How you play those 12 optionals that's really critical.
Mhm.
And it's important for me. I realized this the first couple of years that I played. I need to know, well, the last 6 races at Santa Anita, do I have a play there? Because if I hold bullets back for Santa Anita, I may walk past a couple of horses at 12-1 at Gulfstream that are potentially really solid horses waiting for Santa Anita because I didn't do the work in advance. So I realized I've got to get the work done in advance. That's why I'm starting on Sunday for first chance, last chance, and I'm starting on Tuesday for Friday. And I hope to be working on Thursday for Saturday because I've got to know, is there something live at Santa Anita that I need to save bullets for, or am I better deploying my resources now and taking what I can see at Gulfstream or at Fairgrounds?
Yeah, and Jeff Busson has heard me complain multiple years when Golden Gate was involved
Yeah.
that I still have plays left and it's only Golden Gate remaining because I didn't do enough work early to know that I didn't want to play Golden Gate, and I passed up opportunities to play at Fairgrounds or to play at another track that had a better field or a better profile. Has anybody else fallen into that trap?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think one of the troubles is when you handicap a race and whether it's strat, you may think you've landed on a 10-1 or something that you really want to play, and then as you're sitting in there and you see that it's now 9-2, but so you skip that race and now you've not fired that bullet, and those can accumulate. I've found that in the past where I've passed on races because I'm not seeing what I wanted to see on the odds board, and then I get to the end and now I've got 6 shots I need to take, and a bunch of races that I don't particularly like or don't think is going to yield anything worthwhile. Now with Turfway being part of the mix, that seems to change things, for the last year or so, because there's a lot of seems like a lot of the prices have come those last 2 or 3 races. So it's hard not to try to look at those, but definitely I agree with what Kevin was saying on that, and what Jeff said or what you said with Jeff, where it's you can easily save too many to the end, and then you're stuck playing things that you don't particularly want to play.
Has anyone become a Turfway convert that used to play Golden Gate at the end, or?
I don't mind. I like playing Turfway in contests because it's obviously more volatile than Golden Gate. You just find one and stab.
Yeah, I have never bet $1 on Turfway through an ADW or through my pocket. Yet the last 2 years, I have bet more than 3 races at Turfway both years in the NHC.
I agree I'm right with John.
So one overriding theme I hear when we're trying to prepare is organization. We all have our own mechanisms where we need to be organized and be able to, like Kevin told us, to know ourselves, so we know our capabilities. So the only way to get that is to be organized going into the event, organized while you're handicapping, organizing while you're watching the races, like Jeff Busson had said, because it can be overwhelming in that room with everything going on at once. Does anybody have any tricks, like what they do to keep themselves proverbially grounded while all of this commotion is going on? Kevin, you had an opinion?
Yeah, I'll lay something out on that spreadsheet, John. Like, if you envision Saturday, there's 8 mandatories and there's 12 optionals. Obviously, you got your.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I think there's 10 mandatories.
Oh, is there 10? Okay.
I think so.
10. Yeah, 10 and 10. So there's 10 optionals. I want to have at least 16, if not 18 possible plays for those 10 optionals, because I don't know which ones I'm going to pick. I don't know which ones might scratch. I don't know the actual value I'm going to get at post time. And I don't know where I'm going to be on the board and what I might need to try to make the cut. So I want to have more plays than I want to have more picks than I actually have plays. And in each one of them on that spreadsheet, I have the post time, because when I see the post times getting scrunched together and they're maybe only 2 minutes apart, that's a warning to me that I better be prepared to either get some of those in advance. Otherwise, I may run the risk of getting shut out of the one that I really want to play. So I think you got to have the post times written on a sheet right in front of you where you can see them all. And I got 5 races coming up here in 10 minutes and I got to make some decisions.
Yeah, I'll give a shout out to my friend Chris Podratz, who's out in California. A couple of years ago, I bribed him with those chocolates that I make, those turtles, and he gave me a spreadsheet that listed every race by every post time, color-coded by dirt, turf, or synthetic, and then grouped by any race that was going to be within 2 minutes of each other. So you could get just by the colors when your next bollocks of races were coming, and it was wonderful. And it also had numbered down the side. If there were 75 races and there were 10 mandatories, you'd have 65 for the non-mandatories and then 10 in a different color for the mandatories. So you'd know exactly how many races were left, how many plays that you might have had remaining, and it was a wonderful tool. So every year I give him a box of chocolates and he gives me a nice printout, which I
There you go.
Anybody
we may
else
all
do
need the
anything
recipe
similar
for
to
the
Kevin?
chocolates.
I'm sorry, Jeff?
I said we may all need the recipe for the chocolates. I want to make chocolates.
Yeah, exactly. Anybody else do anything special when they try to get organized?
Yeah, maybe on Saturday, I almost treat it like a pick and pray. I walk in and kind of once after the scratches and figure it out and just put almost all my picks in because I really, you're even with everybody, and I don't think you really have to adjust too much. It's almost like playing a live tourney on horse tourneys. That's how I try to structure it. It's a little less stressful and less chance to miss a race.
Okay. Anybody else?
Mhm.
So do you guys have floors for odds of a horse that you want to be willing to play? Like I've always had a floor at roughly 5-1 in the past, but when I look at the people that finish in the money, they seem to just pick a lot of winners at any odds. They don't necessarily have a floor. When you're handicapping, do you just try to pick winners, or are you looking for horses at certain prices that have chances? How about Jeff Vandry? Why don't we start with you?
With the mandatories, I'm mostly trying to just pick the winner. If it's a 1-9 or odds on, I'm probably not going to be that interested. But I'm not necessarily looking to make a big stretch on my opinion to try to come up with the bomb. Now, if I do like it, and I would like it if it wasn't a mandatory, then that's a different story. But when it comes to the optionals, I have a floor of probably 9-2, 5-1 that I don't mind playing. I won't play all of them in that range. I'm going to need to try to take some shots throughout the day, so I will look for a handful of races where I can go after that, 20-1, 15-1, something that could cap out. But I'm not going to be looking at that on every single optional that I play. I think if you can get in, the range of collecting $15 to $20, a race that you hit, those add up relatively quick if you hit a few of them. And there's a lot of logical horses that come in that are in that 9-2, 5-1, 6-1 range that. When it comes down to the end of Saturday and you're looking at making the cut and you're only a couple of bucks out and you've fired at a lot of 30-1s, then those 9-2s start looking a little bit better at that point. So I'm
We're going to talk about that a little
I'll
later.
look at yeah.
We'll talk about that a little bit later because I disagree with what you're saying. I don't think the idea is just to make the money. I think the idea is to try to win. So even if you are close to the money, I still think you should be firing away at bombs. So Dave, you have I want to say a tendency, but your handicapping usually leads you to longer priced horses anyway. Does that mean you're focused more on longer priced horses, or do you just handicap normal and the horses come at the prices you'd like?
Yeah, I mean, in general, I consider myself someone who searches for value in handicapping more than getting the most picks right. And I would say theoretically, there's always the idea in my head of a floor, wanting 6-1 or 8-1 or whatever it may be for optionals at the NHC. But I kind of feel like the hardest part of this game nowadays is trying to predict what the actual final odds on a horse will be. So even if you have that in mind, and I use Formulator and I'll say, it's projected to go off at 6-1. Doesn't always go off at 6-1. Sometimes it goes off at 4-1. Sometimes it goes off at 10-1. I feel like less and less I'm holding myself to that rigid standard of it needs to be at this price point. It's much more of a, hopefully it's not like 5-2 or something like that. And also, I just feel very good about the pick in general. So.
Do we think it's also a function of how we handicap, like how you bet in normal life? Like if you're more comfortable with 3-1 shots, you want to take them there because those are the horses you can pick more often? Or do you think you have to try to get prices here and you have to handicap a little bit differently? Any opinion on that, Kevin or Greg?
I'm a big believer in, be yourself, Greg, it's one of my favorite songs that I listen to from Audio Slave to remind myself to handicap the way that I am, be myself when I'm making my picks here. I think it's important. It's like, you want to put your best foot forward. And I think you can get cognizant a little bit of the prices, but part of the thing too is when you're looking for value, I always want to look for the best value that I can get in my optional plays, and hold myself accountable that if I'm really looking at a horse who's 2-1 or 8-5, is this really an optional quality race? Because again, that goes back to handicapping the card. What are the races that are going to produce the payouts that are going to make you competitive? And you want to put your money into those races, or put your mythical plays into those races, I think. So when you're looking at races like 12-horse maiden races that are full fields and 1 1/16 on the turf or something, you're going to get some volatility there. So if you can, handicap things and get an edge in races such as that, I think that's where you're going to get the payouts that are going to move you up the leaderboard.
Has anybody thought about playing races that are shorter fields that not a lot of other players play? Like that 12-horse maiden on the turf at Gulfstream going 1 1/16. I'm guessing that 70% of the room is trying to play that race, right? Because it looks like a wide open turf race. Is there
I actually had a play that fits that description. I think last year or 2 years ago, John, there was a Baffert horse who I thought was just foamy baloney at 4-5. I think it was a 5-horse field at Santa Anita, and I liked the longest shot on the board, double barreled it on both entries, and it came in. It was just a shame that I couldn't capitalize that. I couldn't make the cut. But, I think you have to look, and sometimes you're going to find the angle that you like on a short field. And if it makes sense and you're getting the price, it doesn't matter how many horses are in the field as long as you're getting the value, I think.
Yeah, I agree with Kevin, especially let's say it's a 5 or 6 horse field, a 3-5 shot with a race with no pace, and he or she's a stone closer at 6 furlongs, and you like maybe the third choice is maybe a 4 or 5-1, and you think it's long gone. I don't see an issue playing it because I think the horse has got a 40% chance of winning, and you're getting 4x or 5x. I mean, I think that's where you say, okay, this horse isn't going to win, in my opinion, and I think that my horse has a 40% chance of winning. I'm getting 4 or 5, 3, 4, 5-1.
How do you look at those races, Jeff Bussin? I know that in years past, I've looked over your shoulder and it's like, how the hell do you have that long shot? I thought this 3-5 was home free.
Well, I with my optional plays, I tend to look for what I call the chaos races in the larger fields where I think that the price horses have a good chance. Where I get tripped up, and this seems to happen every year, is there might be a 5-minute period of time where I'm free and I'll be like, yeah, let me take a look at this race at Laurel that's going off in 5 minutes. And it might only be a 6-horse field, but I look at it, I'm like, wow, this 2-to-1 morning line horse is currently listed at 9-to-1. And I think it's got a really good shot. All of a sudden, you get in that situation and you're like, do I stay disciplined and not bet it and stick with the original plan? Or do I, put this bet in knowing that I'm going to have to, eliminate one of my other races that I wanted to bet later? I mean, that happens all the time. So sometimes I feel like the better strategy is to just not even look.
Yeah, it kind of comes back to our organization part and having your plays somewhat mapped out, assuming your 10-to-1 shot's not going off at 9-to-5 and you don't have to pivot as much. But once you get your structure, I think most of us somewhat stay within that structure. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to pivot, Jeff Vandry, what do you do? Like if you have a horse that's 10-to-1 and he's going off at 9-to-5, will you just look for another race, or will you stick to your guns and bet that horse regardless of price?
No, I won't stick to my guns. I'll definitely look for another race. I've got, like you mentioned, with the spreadsheet similar to what Chris has provided you for the chocolates. I've got the same thing where it's a spreadsheet that's just going from top to bottom. It's every single race by post time, and I'll know which races I'm completely passing. Once I decide I'm going to pass them, I won't even bother looking, and then I'll have a bunch of I'll go with basically I put in A, B, then mandatory, and then pass. So I'll have some A plays that I really want to look at, and those are generally going to be longer price horses where I really like something that could move the needle. But if I like that horse that's 10-to-1 and all of a sudden now he's 9-to-5 because it was a terrible morning line, then I'm going to have a bunch of other options after that. So I'll just skip the race and then move on to my next A or B priority race and hopefully see what I want to see there. And if not, I'll just keep moving along and hopefully find something to where I'm not stuck with all those extra bullets that we already talked about at the end of the day. But yeah, I'm definitely not going to bet something that, if he goes from 10-to-1 to 9-to-2 and I really like the horse, then yeah, maybe. But dropping much below that, then it's a pass race.
Makes sense. So Dave, you're eligible this year for a $5 million tour bonus, as it were, as the champion. So does your preparation change for this event based on a high volatility entry that you try to go for everything on one entry, or are you going to handicap just like you normally would?
In my head right now, I think it'll just be like I normally would. I think back to my first NHC, and I thought going out there, I would be able to understand everything that was going on, and it'd be no sweat or whatever. And then I got out there, and it was like sensory overload. And, it was a whole different situation than I had ever experienced. So, luckily on this panel, you have somebody who's been through this twice, so he knows the way to go through this and everything. But the plan at the moment is to just go through it like I normally would. Obviously, the picks I feel more strongly about will be on the $5 million entry in day one. If I get to the end of day one and that one has 0 and the other one has like $120, then you got to think about what you want to do in that situation. But I haven't had to experience that with or without $5 million on the line. So we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Yeah. What kind of advice would you give him, Kevin, having gone through it twice?
I'll tell a story from NHC 2022, which is the first time I was playing with the bonus. So in that event on Saturday, it was probably mid-afternoon on Saturday. It was like Santa Anita's race 5 or race 6 was coming up. So we were pretty deep into it. I was in 26th place on the bonus entry. I had about, $170 on that. And I had about $110 on my other entry, which was in 70th something, or, maybe 80th or something down the board a ways. So in the race, there were 2 horses that I was looking at. One of them was 22-to-1. who was a pioneer of the Nile filly who had come out of the La Brea, the Grade 1 dirt race. And then there was, I'm trying to remember the name of the horse. It was a horse who I had felt was probably the best turf filly of the 3-year-olds at Santa Anita that winter, like the best of her generation on the turf. And she was, I thought, a fair price at 7-2. So I'm like, well, gee, I'm in 26th place. If I can nail this horse at 7-2, I can chip up to about 12th place. I'll be positioning myself for the final table. And I'm like, I like the 22-1. I can put her on the other entry that's $110. And, if she wins, it'll be a good consolation prize for me that she'll get that $110 entry roughly up to the same spot as the bonus entry. So that's the way I played it. And of course, the irony of it is the 22-1 wins the race. I did not put her on the bonus entry. Had I put her on the bonus entry, I have the sanity of playing the final table races and knowing I would not have won the bonus that year. I would finish 5th, maybe 6th or something. So it really didn't hurt me as much as it could have. But it's an anecdotal story. And the irony of it is, in August 2021, because that was the COVID year when they put first chance, last chance in the summer, I had exactly the same decision. And I put the 2-1 on my best entry and the 14-1 on my trailing entry, walk away from the tote machine 2 minutes to post. And I said, Kev, do you want to win this damn thing or not? And I changed my mind and I went back there and I canceled them both. And I put the 14-1 on my big entry and the 2-1 on my trailing entry. The 14-1 won, and that's why I won the tour the first year I won it, is I made the change and I played aggressive. And if I had just remembered that and did the same thing at NHC, I would not have won the bonus, but I would have given the whatever they do, if they're taping it or filming it or something, I would have given them something to cheer about on the final table. I would have been at the final table, hands down, no doubt about it.
Does anybody disagree with that strategy? So I think Kevin's second time betting the 14-1 on your good entry and the 2-1 on your bad entry is the right way to go. I think if you're trying to win, you want your biggest prices, even if they're your secondary opinion, on your best entry, because who cares if you make the money? I mean, 10 grand's not going to change our lifestyle one iota for finishing 70th. 750,000 for winning the thing might. Right? So why just chip up, in a poker analogy, when you can just go all in and double your money immediately or really give yourself a chance? Does anybody think
that was a golf analogy, John?
Yeah, that's true. Does anybody disagree with that, or you think it's opposite? You think you'd rather make the money and then worry about it?
I think in the scenario you just described, I think you bet the 14-1 on both entries. I mean, if you have a bad entry that's low down there, why would you be betting 2-1 horses?
Yeah.
If you like the 14-1, be aggressive, bet it on the bonus, and bet it on your bad entry as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. Anybody else disagree or have an opinion?
No, I mean, when the year that it was the one they did in the summer.
Yeah, 2020.
Yeah, I had the similar case, and I happened to get lucky and still make the cut and the final table. But I learned a hard lesson of changing my strategy from Friday to Saturday. So I had a really good Friday on the entry that wound up doing well. But then I started playing very conservative on that entry, trying to preserve it on Saturday, and I was playing aggressive on the other one. And the other one was much better on Saturday than it was on Friday. So after that, I learned that hard lesson that you really need to continue to play it. But at least stick to the strategy and play it as you had been playing and what got you there, as opposed to trying to tweak it and all of a sudden playing conservative when you should keep your foot on the pedal.
Yeah, and Jeff Buston, you had one of those years, didn't you? After day one, you were in the $160. You might have needed 20 to make the money, and you had a second entry at 10.
Yeah, I think I was either like 5th or 7th after day one, And so I went into day 2 with a strategy of, it's okay if I bet, some 3-1 horses or some 9-2 horses. I only have to hit a few. And I bet all my long shots on my other entry that was really low after day 1. And I kept hitting these long shots. And on day 2, my low entry passed my first entry, and my first entry ended up not making it, but my second entry did.
Yeah.
So it's like, you just, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Sometimes there's just an element of, random luck involved.
And if I could comment a little bit on that too, I think if we want to look at just tendencies, I think there's a tendency for Saturday to produce more prices and higher payouts. There tends to be bigger fields. There tends to be a little bit more competition in those fields, like bigger and more competitive fields at the same time. Not in every race, but just as a general tendency. So I think when you're going into Saturday, I think you want to have a little bit more aggressiveness in your mentality because the prices are going to be there. And I think if I could probably speak a little bit to, I think, and this is maybe something where I think I may be thinking of adjusting the way I play too, but I've had a lot of success on the horse tourney stuff when somebody gets a substantial lead. And instead of trying to swing for the big long shots, you just take the logical 3-1 shots and you chip away, and in 3 or 4 races, you're right on their heels. And now all of a sudden you got them. But I think there's a reason for that too. When you're playing that horse tourney stuff and you got 12 races on a live contest, the closer you get to the end of the contest, the more it can make sense to pick the more logical winner. The more runway you have before the contest actually ends, I think the more aggressive you have to be. Plus, you're playing a field of 700 people as opposed to playing a field of maybe 70 people. Like if you're thinking about a cash game or a Keeneland qualifier or whatever. So I think those are different things. And, I think that's a little bit of why I got my opinion of, you can kind of chip up on the bad entry with a lesser price sometimes. It works sometimes, but maybe not in a 700-person contest.
So we're all double qualified for the event. And I'm curious, and for people listening and watching, how you guys play your 2 entries. Like, I try to play mine with my primary pick and an alternate pick. If my alternate pick wins at a price, my alternate pick now becomes my primary because that's my high bankroll. And then I make my primary plays on that ticket. And if they flip again, I flip my picks again. So whatever my highest bankroll is my primary ticket, whatever my lowest bankroll is my secondary ticket. Does anybody else play similarly or differently than that?
Started last year playing a little differently, and with the optionals pretty much playing it, especially early in the tournament, is playing the same opinion on both entries in an optional, and either playing the same entry on a mandatory, or if I'm really kind of broken up, I will split it.
All right, so you're playing, your optionals are the same horses, and the mandatories you're taking different horses.
Yeah, on the first day, definitely.
Anybody else? Jeff Vendry?
I'll only play the same on both entries for an optional. For mandatory, I very well might be more inclined to, but if in an optional, the odds of me doing that are slim unless it's a horse that I really, really liked at a price, then I have no problem playing it on both. But I'm trying to I'll try to cast a little wider net, and whether it's playing 2 horses in a large chaos race that I think each have a chance and hoping to catch one of them, or whether it's just playing, a single horse in 2 completely different races on the optional. So really every scenario is in play, but I would say more often than not, I'm playing 2 different optionals on each ticket, not trying to play against myself unless I really like something or think it's a race that, I can, with 2 picks, I can, catch one of them and at least get 1 ticket moved up.
I see you nodding, Kevin.
Yeah, I agree with what Jeff said there. Like the last few years, I've been gravitating more towards, with the mandatories, I'm trying to pick the winner If I think the winner is 12-1, I'll pick it. If I think the winner is 5-2, I'll pick it. And I'll typically try to pick the mandatories with just one horse on both entries, unless I really see something that I got to take a shot at these two prices. But if I think there's a winner that I can see clearly, I want to take it on both. The other thing on the optionals, like what Jeff is saying, is the more in the later years that I think I've been getting a little bit more experienced with this, I want to at least take somewhere between 25 and 50% of my optionals. I want to double up on both entries. If I'm not playing at least some of my optionals on both tickets, I'm not expressing my primary opinion strongly enough. Then the rest of the optionals, whether that's 75% or 50% of them, like Jeff said, I don't want to bet against myself. I want to find different races to take my best value opinion in different races on each of the entries. And then honestly, John, then I'm back to what you said. If my best entry, if my entry one becomes better than entry two, or entry two becomes better than entry one, I'm going to put my best opinions on the one that's in front.
What about Dave? How do you handle that situation?
Well, for my two entry, because I failed so many times at the NHC, I've tried a bunch of different strategies. And one of the more recent ones that I've tried that I've kind of taken a liking to a little bit is kind of based on like position in poker. The later you act, the better decisions you'll probably make. So at least on day one, I'll tend to kind of use entry one earlier in the day and entry two a little bit later in the day. I definitely want to keep my best picks on the same entry. But I think there's a point during the day where you're just kind of like, you might have 10 or 12 races that all feel about the same. And the second entry, I can kind of get into at least decent position based on the scores and stuff. And then day two is much more, I have a good entry and a bad entry. And, I think we all kind of know how to deal with that situation. But for day one, I kind of like the idea of on the second entry, knowing whether it's bunched and low scoring or whether there have been bombs, and I might need to play a little bit of catch up.
Yeah, and that's definitely a hole in my game. I very rarely play the same horse on both entries. Very, very rarely. It's got to be a horse that I think is a legitimate long shot with a legitimate chance to win, and then I'll use them on both, because then it's just too much bang for your buck. But I'm much more likely to bet an A horse and a B horse in a race that I think there's a vulnerable favorite, and I like two horses over 10-1. Or there's a race at Santa Anita and a race at Turfway that I think are wide open, and I want to take a shot on both races and having a long shot on each one of my ticket in two separate races. But I actually, looking at the weekly scores from Kevin, from Greg, from Jeff Vandry, and noticing how often you guys have the same pick on multiple entries. And when those picks hit, you are in contention quite often. So I think there's not some merit, there's a lot of merit to taking your best opinions and doubling up on those best opinions to give yourself multiple chances to make the money, make the final table, and win the thing when your best opinions of prices are really, really good. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Jeff Busson, do you play the same horse on multiple entries, or do you go different most of the time?
I would say day one, very, very, very rarely. I would almost always try to cast the wider net, like Jeff Andrew was saying. If you get to day two and, there's a longer shot horse that I really like, and I have one really good entry and one, mediocre to not so good entry. Yeah, I'll play at that point, I'll play the same horse on both entries, but very rarely on day one.
John, just to add to that too, when I said 25 to 50%, like I challenge myself that at least 25% of my optionals need to be the same horse. I also challenge myself that no more than 50% can be the same horse. Because if you're playing too much the same horse, you're really not leveraging the fact that you earned 2 entries to get into this thing. So, you got 2 entries, you got to use them. And if it's the same horse on everything, are you really optimizing your opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, at some point they have to take a different road to optimize them. It's just a matter of when you do that. Like, how confident are you in keep playing the same horses on both entries on day one and then reevaluate on day 2? I don't know that that's the worst strategy in the world either. All right, so I want
You've
to get
seen,
into
over the
Go ahead.
last, I was just gonna say, over the last couple of years, there's been several cases where I've seen where, a player will use exact entries on both tickets, and I think 2 years ago, maybe 1 or 2 of them did that, and both made the final table. So it's, yeah. So I mean, if you're, to me, that I don't know that I can be that spot on. I mean, it's great that they can do that and that they had success doing it. But yeah, I tend to think that, I mean, if you've got them both there and they're both the same, and you make the final table with common entries or make the cut with common entries, then you've got huge leverage. But to get to that point, I just don't know that I'm trust myself to be that precise. But it's a powerful strategy if you can make it work. It's just not, it's just not for me.
Yeah, Paul Kalia, who won the tournament and finished 4th that year with basically, I think all his picks were the same except for the final 2 races. And I think in that same year, Stephen Wells was also at the final table with 2 entries.
Yep.
And Stephen Wells was a BCBC champion not that long ago. And he had that strategy in the NHC, and that almost worked for him too. So there's definitely merit to the strategy. I have the whole is the fear of missing out. I hate to have other long prices and races I was interested in, and then they come in.
Yeah. And John, I'd just add, I think they succeeded, but I'm not sure that they optimized their opportunity. I think they just outplayed what the opportunity, they played so well that they didn't need to maximize the opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And I think I'd also like to just give one shout out to the guy who's part of this group, that it was actually Jonathan Kinchin who qualified 2 entries. That's the reason why those guys even have the opportunity to get 2 entries to the final table.
Yeah, and they changed the rule, I think, the first year that he did it, and didn't let both entries onto the final table.
They changed the rule because of Kinchin's performance. And I'm not even sure that he used the same picks. He might have used different picks and got them both there, but you'd have to ask him. I don't know. So I don't know.
I'm actually not sure. So we do have a question. So day 1, let's say you do very well. What kind of psyche changes do you go through? Like when you're picking well and you're up early, does your mindset change? Do you start to get a little bit more conservative, like Jeff Vandry talked about and Jeff Busson? Like, oh, I've got a big number, I just want to chip up a little and chip up a little. Or at what point do you say this is the wrong strategy? I need to keep being aggressive. I keep needing to move my number up the board. Does anybody have an opinion on that?
I already learned my lesson and gave you that story. So
I think it depends how many
I think
races
it's just
are
human
left in
nature
the tournament.
to feel more comfortable if you get, you have a really good day 1, and not want to blow it, basically, right? You want to, if you're in the top 10 after day 1 and someone looks back and goes, you didn't make day 2 because you played a bunch of 20-to-1 shots, what the heck were you doing? That's probably harder to answer for than if you play, 3-to-1 shots and they would go, oh, maybe you were just unlucky or whatever. I think it's just kind of a human nature thing to feel more comfortable, take picks that you feel more comfortable with. But I think in order to win an event like this, you kind of have to dive into that uncomfortable feeling and play some things that, you're kind of hoping a little bit. You're like, even if I hit this to finish second, it's going to give me just as many points as I would get with the 3-to-1 that would have won. So I think that's a big thing, is leaning into that uncomfortable nature of it.
Yeah. and I found this for me last year. After day one, I sat in 26th place. I had $124, something to that effect. So I thought I needed about $50 to make the money. And my, what was it, 10 mandatory and 12 optional. So 22 plays on Saturday. I had 2 horses that were 5-1, and every other horse in my card was 10-1 and more. And I hit one winner all day. I hit one 5-1 shot, and that was it. And I ended up with $140. And I felt foolish, but I also felt like I played it absolutely properly. Like I wasn't just trying to make the money. I was trying to have another $130 day to get to $250 to be at the final table after day 2 and not even have to worry about Sunday. And I had a couple of friends of mine, not anybody in this group, asking me, what are you doing? Just bet a 5-1 shot or a 6-1 shot. You can hit 2 of those and make the money. And it's really hard to, like Dave's saying, you look silly and you have egg on your face when you just crash out like that. But I do think it's the right strategy, and it's really hard to execute it, though.
And I think there's 2 different things that you're talking about here too, which is making the money or trying to win the event. And I think if you take Mike Gillum a couple years ago out of the equation, who was like 55th, 56th, 57th going into the final day and kind of hit almost every single race in order to win, I think you'll notice that a lot of the winners had to be probably like top 15, top 20 going into day 3. Like there weren't giant jumps. There not even a lot of giant jumps to get to the final table, to be honest, much less to get to the top. So if you're playing to win, you kind of have to play to win on day 2, not just get to day 3 and go from there. And this is from someone who has not made the money in 12 tries. So, put that in there just as well.
Well, Dave, I agree with you. And I mean, I have made the cut and made some money. The tournament is generally going to be won on Saturday. It's a function of the volatility of the races, the field sizes, and the competitiveness. Because if you guys just think about what are the type of races that run early on a card and run early on a card on Sunday versus the type of races that run at prime time on Saturday as the feature race at all the major tracks, you're going to get 2 totally different things. And there is, some Saturday stakes races are going to be 6 horses and an even money shot's going to win the grade 1. But so many other of those races on Saturday are big fields, and there's just a ton of opportunity.
Perfect. So I wanted to talk a little briefly about the mandatory races, both on Friday and Saturday. I think the last couple of years they instituted, we had 8 mandatories on Friday, and then we had 10 mandatories on Saturday. So 18 of the races were mandatory, and then the other 18 were our optional races on Fridays and Saturdays. Do you handicap the mandatory races differently? So like on one hand, if a cap horse wins a mandatory, an outsized number of people in the room have it, and you're at a big disadvantage if you don't. But on the other hand, if a 3-1 or a 5-1 shot, they're likely going to be underutilized, and you can move way up a leaderboard by getting $17 in a mandatory race. Do you guys look at this? I know Kevin said that he wants to just pick the winner. So the price is the price and pick the winner. And I actually think that's the right strategy in general. How else do people look at that? Look at that any differently, Jeff Bussin, or do you look at it the same way? Pick a winner.
I want to pick the horse out of the group of, usually 3 or 4 horses that I think have a good chance of winning. I want to pick the horse that I think has the best odds relative to its chance of winning. So I think if I think a horse should be 2-1 and I'm getting 7-1, there's a good chance I'm gonna take that horse. I have a tendency not to, laser focus myself onto, okay, this is the horse that I think is gonna win the race, and I'm gonna bet it even if it's 2-1. I'm more looking at most races I look at. I feel like, for me it's rare that there's one horse that really stands out above all the others. I usually feel like that there's a number of horses that have a chance to win, And for the mandatories, I will choose out of usually that pool of 3 or 4, the horse that I think is getting the best bang for the buck odds wise.
Greg, you had mentioned that your mandatories, you're looking for different horses on your entries. How do you determine those horses?
Yeah, because unless I think what Jeff was saying is, unless you have a really strong opinion, because it's a mandatory, I got to do something here, and I will generally split it up on my first 2 choices, unless there's somebody I really like. But I'll look for the horse. Obviously, a 3 to 5 or 4, 7 to 5, you may not play, but as Kevin said, just put something on the board, find something you like, find your top 2 picks, kind of like you would do in a Friday contest.
Dave, do you do anything differently, or do you handicap similarly?
Yeah, I think I handicap similarly. Like Jeff Andrew said, I think I'm a little more willing to accept a lower price in those situations. Just because of the nature of it, you have to play those races. When it's an optional, you have a little more leeway in finding your value. So with those, and especially if you have 2 entries, you can kind of go winner, who I hope is the winner on one, and then be a little hopeful on the second one if you want.
Yeah, and I think you actually get more bang for your buck in a low-priced horse in a mandatory than you do in a high-priced horse. Because if a 2-to-1 shot wins, in that room, he probably plays more like a 5 or a 6-to-1 shot, because most people are gravitating towards higher prices. And a 2-to-1 shot is going to collect basically $10. So if you can make up $10 on 550 other contest entries out of $700 field, that could be the difference between making the money, making the final table, etc. And if you do that 2 or 3 times over the course of 16 mandatory races, that could really make a difference in your finish position and your chance of winning the contest. Does anybody disagree with that?
Well, I think maybe the biggest thing with that, though, is to keep the mindset if the opposite happens, like the 20-to-1 comes in and it sounds like 400 of your friends had that horse, even though only like 20 of them actually had it, to not beat yourself up for the next 48 hours and kind of second guess yourself. Like if that's your strategy, that you feel like those, like a 3-to-1 and a mandatory is good and is going to help you out, not to just suddenly be like, I'm never going to do that again because it didn't go my way that first time.
Yeah, be consistent. Be consistent with whatever pitch you're going to make, right?
Yeah.
Anybody else have any opinion on that?
No, I think you're right on that, John. I agree with your statement. I think there was that golden gate in 2020 where a lot of people got run over by 2 cappers coming in in the mandatory races late. I was one of the people that got run over, but that can happen. But I think if you like a horse that you think is going to win those mandatories, if you take them, especially if you double barrel them, I mean, if you're in any kind of position between 100, 200th, you could jump 50, 100 people with $10, and that's a pretty big move up the board that gets you in position that when your optional comes in at 12-to-1, now you're positioned to capitalize on that.
Right. Yeah, and I am certainly not advocating just taking a favorite in a mandatory race, but if you handicap and you happen to like the favorite or the second choice, you don't really have to stretch too far to just choose them as your most likely winner. But if you do like a 10-to-1 shot or a 15-to-1 shot, by all means, take them and take them on multiple entries if that works best. But I don't think you should shy away from potential winners in a mandatory race. At least that's my opinion. So how superstitious are we? So do you guys look and handicap the Sunday races prior to what the finish on Saturday, meaning you don't know whether or not you've made the cut? Do you look at the Sunday races and already map out a strategy for how you're going to play Sunday morning when it's still Friday night after the first set of races?
Well, of course, John, it's 4,125 points for Silver Sunday.
Right. But that's new. That's only been the last 2 years.
I'm
Anybody else?
exhausted. I'm not looking at Sunday unless I have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do only because of what Kevin said now, because of the Sunday tournament. Prior to that, I didn't pay that much attention to Sunday unless I made it there.
Dave, do you look at Sunday?
I mean, this is the easiest question of all for me because I've never made the cut, and I definitely handicap the races. So, yeah, I definitely do. Yeah, it's pretty. It's almost like we have Silver Sunday, but like first chance, last chance. It's about the same amount of races, and I find it's pretty easy to do. And there's definitely no stress if if I'm not playing for the big money anymore. There's no stress in doing it.
Yeah, it definitely loosens up the handicapping. I get a lot more creative on the horses I'm going to take on Sunday rather than even Thursday or Friday, because I'm not spending as much time doing it, and it doesn't take many reasons to take a 15 or a 20 to 1 shot in the races.
Yeah, John, if I be honest about, should I or do I think I should prep for Sunday ahead of time? I do, and I hope I can do that. But if I just get, run over by how much, workload it is to try and handicap them all and get them done, the first thing I'll sacrifice is Sunday because I want to put my best effort forward on Saturday. And then if I make it and I'm past the cut, I figure, well, if I have to wing it on Sunday, I want to wing it on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Not that I want that. I'd like to be prepared, but if there's something that I have to cut, that would be it.
Well, my theory on Sunday is that you don't even know what horses you want to bet on Sunday until you know when you finish on Saturday, right? If you're 75th and you need to make up $80 to make the final table, well, who cares how many 4 to 1 shots you like? You only have a fixed number of races. You got to take 10 and 15 to 1 shots. So I want to know that going into Sunday before I look at the past performances to know what body of horses I really want to focus on and what races I want to focus on. So my argument is if you handicap earlier or before that, you're kind of confusing yourself because you may like other horses, and then you're going to have to pivot depending on what position you're in the prices that you need. Is that bunk, or can you understand where I'm coming from?
Hey, John, I'm going to use that one now. That's going to be my line.
I think it makes
Stealing
sense.
your line. Why I don't handicap Sunday.
Yeah. I mean, is it bunk though? Am I full of shit, or is it a reasonable argument?
It's reasonable.
Would anybody else consider it? Or are you going to let me sink on my own, on my own petard, as it were?
How many chocolates are you going to give us? No.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So I covered basically the basics, I think, for people that are relatively new to the NHC or what they expect and how we handle it. Does anybody do anything like unconventional? Like, do you have like your own system or your own process that you do that you don't think other people do or that you'd be willing to share? Excuse me.
The only thing I kind of do a little different is I'm more into the pace scenarios than the speed figures. I do differently because to me everybody's got speed figures, and Kevin and I talk a lot about pace, and and Kevin's one of the best at the pedigree angle, and I'm more into the race flow.
Does anybody else use pace rather than speed figures to choose their horses, or do you do anything else unconventional? Use some other product that other people aren't using to try to differentiate yourself?
I rely on pace more than speed figures generally, but all of my information is coming from products that many people in the room are using, so nothing special.
Okay. All right. So how about some final thoughts? Like, what is your best piece of advice that you would offer both a first timer to the NHC and then a veteran to the NHC? And I'll start with you, Jeff Vandry.
Well, I think to me, the biggest thing is, and I think you might have mentioned it earlier, is the fear of missing out. That's probably important for both, or avoiding that is probably important for both veterans or people that are just getting into it. Is that when you're in that room and you we have 800 people, and half of the room is yelling at 60 to 1 that just won at Turfway Park, and you're not, you want, or let me, I'll say even earlier in the card, let's not even say Turfway, but let's say one at Fairgrounds, and then all of a sudden you feel like you've got to chase harder because so many people hit that cap horse and you sat that one out or missed on the race. And I think it can be easy to get into a trap of feeling like you need to chase harder, kind of like what Kevin mentioned earlier on even just the live horse tourney stuff, where you don't need to go now switch over from playing the 7 to 1s that you liked and jump onto the 20 to 1s. You can have some patience and make it a long day, or because it's a long weekend. Now if you're at the end and you're down to those last couple of races at Turfway and Santa Anita, then now your hand on Saturday you're going to have to play what you need to play in order to get there if you're outside that bubble. So for me, it's just that trying to avoid that fear of missing out and changing your strategy based on what the board says and just the vibe and feeling in the room, because you can get caught up into that and make decisions that you probably shouldn't have made.
How about you, Greg? Best advice for a first timer and for a veteran?
I think what Jeff said is don't really get involved with the leaderboard until you have to. Last couple of races on Saturday is, and just play who you like, and also be prepared. Don't try to walk in there if you're a first time starter and handicap the races. Have an idea, as all of us do, of what races you're looking at real seriously and who you're looking to play if they meet some of your criteria. But have your work done. Don't try to do your work there.
And Jeff Bussin?
Yeah, I would pretty much echo the same thoughts. Mainly have a plan coming in, stick to it for sure through day one and probably halfway through day two. Be able to visualize the day, know where those optional plays are that you want to play. You may not have to pick every single race, but I think Kevin mentioned earlier, there might be a pool of races, and depending on scratches and how the odds come out, that's how you may select it, and prepare as much as you can ahead of time, and just know that in the middle of the day things are going to get absolutely bonkers, and make sure that you give yourself enough time to get your picks in. It's nice now that you can bet online from your computer at your table, but years ago when you didn't have that, the last thing you want is to walk up with 3 minutes to post, and there's 3 people in front of you and you get shut out. So get your picks in.
Perfect. Kevin, how about you?
Yeah, I think just echoing being organized, have multiple picks. Don't just pick only 10 optionals or however many there are. Pick multiple more optionals than you're actually going to be able to use, and list them out on the time frame of when the post times are, so you can make the decisions as you go as to which ones you actually need to play and which ones you actually want to play. And I think from that standpoint is when you have all the post times laid out where you can see the races that you want to see, then you're really just making your managerial decisions. You want to make your betting decisions on the day of. You want to do your handicapping the day or 2 days or 3 days before. Do the handicapping as early as you can so that you can really just focus on making your betting decisions on action day, if you will.
I think that's great advice. How about you, Dave?
I would say no one should take my strategic advice, so I'm going to give a couple mental tips, I would say. For first-time people, something I just discussed with you a little while ago when we were talking about the mandatories. When a big price comes in, it's going to sound like everybody in that room has it. And when the leaderboard updates, you'll notice a fraction of those people will have it. People could be celebrating for their friends. They could be celebrating a pick 4 they just hit, or a big exacta or something. It could be a variety of reasons. There was all that hooting and hollering when that price came in. So don't get super down on yourself when you hear that and you don't have it. For a veteran, I kind of consider myself a veteran at this point, and some of the advice I've been trying to give myself is to look at the people who are there for the first time, or it's the first or second time or whatever, and notice how much joy they have for it and how excited they are and everything. I'm probably a little curmudgeon-y when I get there now in all business, and need to lighten up quite a bit. So that would be, if you're like me and you've gone there a long time and it hasn't worked out, have a chat with somebody who's new there and kind of feed off their good vibes for experiencing their first time at the NHC.
Yeah, and I know Dave well enough. Yeah, you're not very curmudgeonly. You don't need to be more laid back. That's for darn sure.
What about me?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Jeff needs a little loosening up every once in a while.
I just check his pulse when we're at Monmouth. We're good. It's fine.
It's true. I stole mine from Paul Sherman a few years ago. I heard him say a couple of things that I really like, and especially for a newbie, but for a veteran too. It's like, do what you know, right? If you're a replay guy, watch replays. If you're a sheets guy, use the sheets. Handicap as you do, because that's what got you there, right? The NHC is not the time to experiment with like a new handicapping technique. Be confident, play the horses you want to play, and have no regrets on the horses that you do play. And then I'll echo exactly what Dave said. Kevin, everybody has said the same thing about the room itself. The room is electric. There's nothing more exciting than the NHC watching a mandatory race with 700 entries or 550 people yelling for one of 12 horses in the room. And it's incredible, but you have to avoid the noise. Like Dave said, half the room probably sounds like they had the 20-1 shot, but at the end of the day, 10% of the people had it. So avoid the noise, stick to your plan, stick to your organization, and it ends up working out really well, and have fun. I mean, that's, to me, the bottom line. The first couple of years, I was a deer in the headlights. This will be year 10, and the last 5, I've had a blast, and I love sitting with the same people every year and telling stories and poking fun and bribing them with my chocolates. And that's what I hope to do 10 more years after this. All right. Well, I wanted to say thank you very much for my guest tonight for spending some time to discuss their NHC preparations. Thank you to our listeners, and I hope you're able to get a good nugget or two when thinking about your NHC preparations. Thanks to Pete and JK and the folks at ITM for giving me a platform to talk with my friends. And good night. And here's hoping that you have a successful NHC from all of us.
Good night.
Good night. Good luck, everyone.